You've created an incredible program for chiropractors. You've taken it to an entrepreneurial level to get paid on not only what you do, but what you know.
I wanted to help people in a natural and holistic way, help people to discover and uncover health comes from within, that we don't need another pill, potion, or lotion for every single symptom that ails us. I realized that in order to be able to make a bigger impact, I was going to have to reach more people through other people, inspire 1,000 people, inspire 1,000 people to inspire 1,000 people. And that's how you can get to 1 billion.
I feel that our listeners really want to know this. How do you create balance as an entrepreneur to still get your workouts in, to do what you need to do? Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I am Lisa D. Murphy, and this is Elevate Wellness, elevating in every area of your life. And today we have an amazing guest, a dear friend, and somebody who is so incredibly powerful and entrepreneurial. And I hope you are somewhere where you can take notes, because this guy just knows his stuff. And I am delighted that he is here with us. I want to welcome my dear friend. He is a chiropractor by trade, but he's a brilliant entrepreneur, my dear friend, Shawn Dill. How are you, Shawn?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for being such a great friend, mentor, and thank you for all of the impact that you're making with everybody who you're reaching through your podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I love your glasses today.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I heard somebody say once, Lisa, that if people cannot dress up as you for Halloween, that you do not have a personal brand. And so I don't always wear these glasses, but I began to always wear the glasses when I heard that.
Well, I just have big hair, so that would be super easy. In the 80s, I could have been like Dee Snider, so that would probably be me. So, Shawn, tell us, I know you are a chiropractor, and you've done something very similar to what Mark, my husband, has done, where he has taken what he knows and has helped other people who do exactly what he does take it to a whole other level. And I feel like that's what you do in excellence. You've created an incredible program for chiropractors, for entrepreneurs. And can you give us a little bit of the backstory? You are a chiropractor, but you've taken it to an entrepreneurial level to get paid on not only what you do, but what you know, to really create recurring revenue. So can you walk us through how this whole thing happened?
Yeah, sort of the Cliff Notes version is, of course, when I started out, my cousin was a chiropractor. He inspired me. I wanted to be a chiropractor just like him. I wanted to help people in a natural and holistic way, help people to discover and uncover the fact that health comes from within, that we don't need another pill, potion, or lotion for every single symptom that ails us. But what we really need is for our bodies to be able to function in the way that we were originally designed, in the way that we were created, that our natural default setting is health. But then there are things that interfere with that, from the environment that we are in, to the foods that we eat, to a lack of exercise. We can interfere with that full expression of our innate or inborn potential to be healthy. And as such, I started out wanting to help everybody, wanting to bang that drum, wanting to reach as many people as possible. In my chiropractic career, I ended up practicing in Costa Rica. At the age of 24, I actually wrote the law that I authored the law that regulates chiropractic in the country of Costa Rica at a very young age. At 25, I was lobbying for and testifying in front of the Costa Rican Congress in Spanish on behalf of that law. So I've been through a lot because I was super passionate. In Costa Rica, I had tremendous clinical success. I was seeing about 250 patient visits per day, every day, 5.5 days a week. It was amazing. And then I had a pivotal moment when I came back to the United States for a chiropractic event. And people were asking me about what was going on in Costa Rica. And as I was sharing, I was like, you know what? In a country of 3 million people, I'm having great success, but I'm really not making a dent. I ended up through my career, ended up coming back to the United States, reduplicated that model here, created a chiropractic franchise. And in the same vein, I was like, look, we're not really making an impact, right? Like, and every one of us, like, don't get me wrong, we're all making an impact, but I'm like, I'm not changing the world. And I realized that, listen, in order to be able to make a bigger impact, I was going to have to reach more people through other people. It's kind of like David Meltzer's inspire 1,000 people to inspire 1,000 people to inspire 1,000 people. And that's how you can get to 1 billion. I was like, I'm not going to be able to go around the world and adjust all 7 billion people. I just won't be able to do that. So I began to contemplate this simple fact that I think and I hope will speak to your audience. And that is this: I began to realize that the world's greatest service providers, the world's greatest doctors, the world's greatest healers, the world's greatest musicians, the artists, the world's greatest financial advisors, accountants, lawyers, the best of the best, they all live in relative obscurity simply because they failed to embrace the concepts of marketing and sales. So there are so many people, like, you think about it, like if you had to see a cardiologist, probably in your town, there's somebody that, like, that's the one that you would see. But that doesn't mean, that just means they're the most popular. It doesn't mean they're the best. And quite possibly there's some other person who's actually incredibly skilled, but because they don't market and because they don't know how to sell, nobody knows who they are. And so I began to develop some concepts. I initially worked with Jay Abraham, Michael Port. I began to take some of these concepts, apply them into chiropractic and scale. Because we had the franchise, people were coming to me and saying, can you help me, but not in the franchise? And out of that was birthed all of our coaching and consulting that came from that.
That is so incredibly eye-opening. And you don't think about that. You know, when you're just starting out and you graduated school and you have a pile of debt and you're opening up your practice, and it's like, yeah, I'll do some advertising, but how we brand ourselves and how we market ourselves is absolutely everything in this environment right now. So what are some tips that you would give people who don't have immediate access to you, and they're saying, okay, you told me that, but now where do I go with that? What do I do? And what kind of success do people who work with you, because you teach this, what kind of success have they had over the last couple of years since you've been really working with them?
Well, first of all, to answer that, the basic fundamentals, I would say start with who is your ideal client. And oftentimes when I ask somebody, who's your ideal client, Lisa, they'll say something like, well, it's a female between the ages of 18 and 45, or it can't be broad. It's not a range. You would say something like, my ideal client is named Ocean. Ocean is 33 years old. She's engaged. She has a full-time job in finance. She makes over $100,000 a year. She lives by herself. She dedicates at least 1 hour to working out, and she lives a holistic and healthy lifestyle. Like, that's a very clear profile of an ideal client. Now, it's ideal client, so that means it doesn't really exist. It's kind of like dating. You have a list of all these things that you would like to find in your spouse, but that person doesn't exist. So maybe we're going to get 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, or maybe we get, some of the things that were great that weren't on your list. So the ideal client is the perfect client. Mm-hmm. Then we build everything around them. So once I know my ideal client, I get lots of questions like, well, how should I dress as a doctor? And I'm always like, well, I don't know. Just ask your ideal client. Sometimes you can get away with not wearing a shirt and tie. I don't wear a lot of shirt and ties, but my ideal client isn't like, hey, what the heck? How come my coach isn't wearing a shirt and tie? But there are plenty of ideal clients that probably expect, if I was only working with C-suite executives, probably do need a shirt and tie as I enter into a corporate environment, sit down in their office and offer coaching in that realm. So ideal client determines everything. Where should my office be? What should my hours be? What kind of music should we play? How should we charge? What should my fees be? All of that is based off of ideal clients. So that's number one. The second thing I would say that people could do is to define your personal brand. And this gets thrown around a lot, but how I define personal brand is this. When you walk into a room, you walk into a restaurant, you go to the restaurant a lot, people would turn and be like, oh, look, it's Shawn. That's the guy who, and now you get to fill in the blank. You need to control that. That's the guy who helps a lot of people and makes a lot of connections. That's the guy that manages the wealth of all of the richest people in our town, or whatever it is. What do you want them to say? And then we can take that and brand yourself through avenues like social media, networking, relationships, etc. What kind of results do people get? I always say, like, the analogy is, listen, so sometimes we get on an airplane. If we're flying commercial, we're going to take the plane from the gate, push it back off the gate, and then taxi it out onto the runway. That's not very exciting, but that's how most businesses start. We've got to push back, go out onto the runway slow, get over there, and then we go down the runway fast, and eventually we achieve liftoff. For me, that's growth. So taking somebody and getting this business off the ground. Now, I will say this, I don't get super passionate about it in the growth mode because it's super high stakes. I was talking to a friend of ours yesterday. I was like, listen, with my fees and you're just starting out, there exists the possibility that I'm making more than you. So you're not going to feel good about the relationship until you've maybe consumed some of our content and you're off the runway. And from there, we enter into scale, because in the service world, we realize, like, listen, there's only so many hours in a day, and I have the capacity to work this many hours, and that work can generate this much of money, of revenue. But if we can learn to scale, and you're an expert at scale, now we can create other people. We can transfer knowledge to them, and maybe we take a percentage of what it is that they're generating. So we see doctors' offices bringing in more doctors, or maybe even opening a second location. There's lots of ways to scale. And as a result of that, you can literally, that's when you get the hockey stick. In growth, we get this linear growth, right? And then scale, we get that exponential growth. Listen, we've helped several franchises add over 8 figures of revenue in a year just by applying some of these scaling concepts.
What do you think? And I think, there's so much in everything that you just said. I do think people don't have an avatar. They don't know who their ideal client is. Even when creating the podcast, when thinking about who are we targeting, everybody wants to appeal to everyone. Well, that's not happening. And I love that you get that precise. It doesn't mean that other people won't find value, but we can't be everything to everybody all of the time. It's impossible. So what do you think are the biggest pitfalls? So they identify their ideal client, and they're hiring coaches like you that are amazing and taking them to the next level. What do you think has somebody go from being where they are flat to uber successful, and then the same person gets all those same skills, they get the same coaching, they get the same, and their business just falls apart? What separates mediocrity from greatness?
First, let me just real quickly, I want to go over the difference between coaching and mentorship. So coaching, in order to coach somebody, and I get this a lot, like I work in a lot of different industries, and I think this is really difficult because if you're a chiropractor, I oftentimes tell people, look, I am a chiropractor, but that doesn't mean that I should be your coach because I'm a chiropractor. I work with people in all kinds of industry. I work in the construction industry. I work in roofing industry. I work in legal. I work in all kinds of different industries, because in order to be a coach, you don't have to have actually done the thing. That's very important. You have situational knowledge and awareness, and it's very strategic to be a coach. For example, in the NFL, in the NBA, most of the best coaches didn't actually excel in the sport that they're coaching. They're just really good coaches. Now, mentorship is different. You want to look for, in mentorship, someone who's done the thing. For example, Michael Jordan was not a very good coach. Isaiah Thomas was a pretty good coach. Larry Bird was a good coach. But Michael Jordan was the best of them as a player, right? And so if you were trying to become a basketball player, you might not want coaching from Michael Jordan, but you would want mentorship. I don't know if Tom Brady is a very good coach, but he would be a great mentor because he's been in those situations before. Now, once I'm receiving coaching, the absolute key is simple. Just execute on the instruction that you're being given. And what I find is the reason why people don't execute is because of this. All great coaching advice. Everybody, please remember this. All of the best stuff on Lisa's podcast, all of it, the best stuff is counterintuitive. That means it's not the stuff that you were like, yeah, come on, Lisa, I agree with that. It's actually the stuff that you were like, what? I don't, that sounds crazy to me. That's the best stuff, because here is the truth. Your intuition has brought you here. Your intuition, without coaching, has gotten you here. And for many of you, that's been a very successful ride. Your intuition has brought you to great degrees of success. But any of you who are like, yeah, but I want more. Okay, now we need to be counterintuitive in order to grow. So you bring on coaches who have fresh perspectives, who give you counterintuitive advice, and then you execute on it. That's the fundamental difference.
I never even thought of that. I mean, like, that really had me go, well, yeah, that makes so much sense. A mentor versus a coach. And I think it's, and we live in a world where everybody's a coach. And it's who have you coached and who have you helped and what success have they had? And then you can tell me if you're a great coach. So I love that we're talking about coaching and how it works. And I do believe that in order to get from point A to point B, you have to surround yourself in excellence in all areas. What do you believe is the fundamental principle that has people catapult to the next level? What do they have that most people don't have?
Their environment. One, they have they've created and curated a really good environment. You mentioned the people that are around them. If you're surrounded by people that are telling you that you can't, that you cannot, then you cannot. If you yourself believe that you cannot. So I would say one is your environment, both external and internal, who's around you, but also the internal environment of what you're thinking, what you believe, the discipline that you have around your daily practices and your lifestyle. That's number one. Number two, then, is a willingness to fail. You have to be willing to, everybody says this, like you fail all of these times, but you just have to have a willingness to try. I know a lot of people that actually have really, really, really great ideas that are just stuck in thinking about how they're going to execute, how they're going to go to market. And then I can come along and say like, hey, if it were me, this is what I would do. And then they're like, okay, well, I want to ask Lisa. And then I want to ask Christian. And then I want to ask Dave. And it's like, but you just need to just go out and be okay with launching something and it failing. That's okay. And just take that leap, because eventually, here's what I know is you're going to get it right if you're passionate about it. I always tell people I love working with people who are passionate about the thing that they do, so passionate that they say things to me like, yeah, Shawn, just if more people knew about this, whatever it is, this would literally change the world. Those are the people that I'm like, okay, well, then let me give you a couple strategies that you could execute on that will take you there. And as long as they don't get stuck in thinking about it, they'll eventually get there because they're super passionate and their passion is going to take them there.
So you're moving from this level to the next level. We all have those blind spots, right? And we always say you have to shine the light where it's dark, not where it's so obvious. And we always look to the obvious. What do you think when people are going from this level, which may be amazing, and they're making millions of dollars, their relationships are healthy, they have it going on, they have all dynamics, moving at a good, rapid pace. What do you think is typically the biggest blind spot for most entrepreneurs?
That they don't know what they don't know. And that's my biggest blind spot. That's your biggest blind spot. That's everyone's. Because, okay, so you've gotten to here and you think you have a great relationship, but you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what a really great relationship would be because you have this relationship. You're making millions of dollars and you're great. but you don't know what you don't know because you don't know what it would be like to make hundreds of millions of dollars. Or it's just you never know what's on that other side. That's the scary part of life. We can become very comfortable. My company's called the Adaptable Entrepreneur because I honestly believe, just like inside of health, that as long as our bodies are constantly adapting to our environment, both internally and externally, we're constantly growing, we're expressing health. But I believe the same thing about business. Listen, you and I remember when Facebook didn't exist, but we couldn't run a business based off of Yellow Pages today. We have to have been able to adapt. Now we have ChatGPT and we have AI. If we're not adapting, then we're going to eventually express dis-ease in our business. And we don't know. You and I don't know what's coming after artificial intelligence. We just don't know what we don't know. But here's what I do know is if we don't adapt to it, that we're going to fail. And so I think the number one thing, the blinders are, is like getting around other people and saying like, hey man, what do you know that I don't know? And being comfortable with like, okay, that's interesting. And also pushing yourself. I love coming out to New York because I get to experience a different people, a different culture, different lifestyle. And that stretches my mind as to what's possible. What do I want? Things like that. And so, you have to put yourself, and it might be reverse. Maybe, Lisa, you need to go on the farm and be like, wow, okay, so this is interesting because we don't know. You don't know what it's like to wash a pig. Which because we don't know what we don't know. But maybe if I did know it, it would be useful in my business.
I think I'll just stick to washing the pups and forget the pig. But I think there's some things I just don't want to know. And I think you started out talking about we have to be willing to risk and being afraid. Like we're going to fail in some capacity, but what does that mean? And I think you believe the same philosophy. How am I failing if I learned from that? And then I can take what I've learned and apply it so that I don't make that mistake again. Or I believe that the serial entrepreneur, which I think years ago that had a negative connotation. And now it's like, oh, a serial entrepreneur, tell me about all your businesses. When it was like, she just has ADHD and can't stay focused on one. It was, no, multiple streams of income are a great thing to have. What do you feel has been, what has been really the greatest challenge you've had in your business and the biggest learning from that?
Wow, the greatest challenge. Listen, being an entrepreneur, and it's funny because, prior to jumping on this call, I was talking to a coaching client. Oftentimes entrepreneurs, we are giant risk takers and we are sort of solo, we champion our own path, right? Like nobody can do it as good as me. I hear that all the time. Nobody can do it. Why are you not scaling? Because nobody can do it as good as I can. To which also too, by the way, I say, well, what if we just got one person that could do it at 80% as good as you? And then I got another person that could do it at 80% as good as you. Now I actually have 160%. So I'm actually, with my 80% people, I'm actually better than you. My answer to that question is leadership. Learning how to be a good leader of other people. I think it's interesting because in the corporate world, I think they get a lot of training and there's a lot of really great leaders of individuals. But they don't have that, that appetite for risk and that creative thought process. And then I think in the entrepreneurial world, there's that appetite for risk and that creative thought process, and then really crappy leaders. And I was one of them. I just was kind of come in and you do it this way, and not recognizing that, people are people have emotions. They have kids at home. They have things going on with them. They've got a headache. So I think for me, that's been the greatest challenge. Learning how to lead people has been critical in an effort to be able to grow.
I love that you just admitted that and you said it out loud. Me too. I was a crappy leader at one point. I wasn't the best version of myself. I thought the way that I did it was the right way. And I think it's always always. Like, is there a day you don't just sit down and go, oh, I can't believe I did that? But that's how we learn. And it's having that, whatever we want to call it, that thick skin, the willingness to take correction, the willingness to accept feedback and not argue against it, and to listen. And I think, Shawn, I've heard you train from the stage. I've listened to you in intimate circles. Your willingness to apply information, I think, is one of your greatest attributes and strengths, and that you just put it out there. Like, I wasn't as great as that or as good as I am now. And we're always, I think, the entrepreneurs that are uber successful, we're willing to own that. We're willing to be messy and mess up. And how do we coach people through that if we're not willing to go through that ourselves? The other thing that I want to just touch on quickly, you handle so much. I mean, you have a very robust life. You travel a lot. How do you manage keeping all the balls in the air, even with your own health? Because I feel that, like, our listeners really want to know this, not just from the health applicable, antidote, not that, but how do you create balance as an entrepreneur to still get your workouts in, to do what you need to do, to take a second to say, hey, I don't feel as good as I used to feel, and make that correction? How have you really incorporated health, which is, if we're not healthy, we can't keep going at the rate we are going at. How do you figure out that balance with everything else and living on the road?
Well, I think that, first of all, the most valuable asset that we possess is time. It's the most valuable asset. It's the most important thing, because even if you were to say, like, well, what about our relationships, right? But you still need to be able to manage time in order to have the relationship. So it starts with an understanding that there's a certain number of hours in the day. And we begin by blocking out, you and I were speaking earlier, sleep. So I've got to make sure that I get the proper rest, no matter where I am, what time zone I am. That's the number one thing. And then that leaves me, with another 16 hours-ish of hours, that time, that then I can begin to allocate. And then I think you have to have your non-negotiables. So the number one non-negotiable would be sleep, takes up to 8 hours. But then you're going to have your health. You have to prioritize and say, okay, so listen, first I've got to drop in time for me to get my movement in. I need to know, like, my supplements, if, my peptides, when am I taking them? And that just goes, it's just time. If it's on the calendar, if you put it in the calendar, it gets done. Super easy, right? And then from there, you had other priorities. I think that then relationships are important. So you have to have time for your spouse, your significant other, your children. And that has to come first. So first has to come you, because you're no good to them if you're sick. You're no good as an employer, right? So number one is you. That's why sleep and health. Number two is relationships. Number three would then be revenue generating activities. So now I can schedule in coaching calls, appearances, podcast interviews, etc., because that's all part of my JOB. So I will put that in. Then, though, we also have to have a time for just, decompression. One of the things that I think that very few, I look at some people who are very busy at their calendar, and I even ask myself, and sometimes them, if I know them well enough, when do you think? So you have to have time to think, because that's when you grow. And it actually needs to be scheduled. It doesn't need to be 3 hours, but you need to say, listen, I just need to take some time on Tuesday to be able to stop and process and think about where we've been, where we're going, to game plan. I need thinking time, because so many of us just get caught up doing all of these things. But that's when we're like, what am I doing? And I'm like, right, because you never stop to think. There's no planning. You're just the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And now, even if you did the non-negotiables first, the rest of your time is still being dictated by everybody else's whim. You're not able to get on your own agenda, because you're just this meeting and that meeting, and this one wants to talk to you. So scheduling time to think allows you to bring back in control over where your time is being allocated. And then lastly, I like to do a weekly, just a time when it doesn't matter when you do it, but once a week, you have to set the calendar for the following week. So many of us just have an assistant. I have an assistant. I can't just let them be in absolute control of the calendar. So I have to sit down and look at the calendar, maybe make a couple calls and say, listen, we're going to have to cancel or move that. You just got me too compressed. But you have to, at the end of the day, you have to take accountability and responsibility for your own time management.
I love that. And what I want everybody to think about is, how do you think best? I can't sit and think. I organize and think. I garden and think. I'm Italian, so I like to hose everything down. And it's when I do my best thinking. So Mark said, I can't believe you spent all day Sunday cleaning the back deck. And I said, I wasn't cleaning the back deck. I was creating my podcast. And that's when I do it. And it's that's what I would ask the audience. How do you think best? And I don't think people think about that. So I love that you just put that in. And Shawn, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, super simple. They could just call me or text me. My phone number is 925-989-6897. Obviously, I won't know who you are, so please let me know who you are when you call or text. You can also email me. My email address is Shawn, SHAWN, at adaptapreneur.com, adaptapreneur.com. Plug in with me on socials at Dr. Shawn Dill. Just reach out. You know what happens is oftentimes too, for anybody listening, if you were inspired, you're like, man, I'd like to talk to him, but then you don't. And that's that first thing that Lisa was saying earlier. Like, that's why you don't get to where you want to be. Just reach out. If I can be of service, I'd love to.
And I'm going to put that up there so everybody will have that. And he's super comforting when you talk to him. He's the best. And I am so appreciative of you taking the time to be on with us today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Again, I'm Lisa D. Murphy. If you like this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Make it a great day, everybody. And write down all the things that you want to do to take your business from here to there, and think about, how do you think best? Make today count. Thanks.